Hey guys, welcome back to Tactical Pontoon. It's me, James, and we're hanging out in the Trigger Cave. And being that we're making a video, that means it's going to be another video on triggers. That's a good subject. It's a subject that I kind of know. And if you read the subject line of this video, then you pretty much know what we're going to be talking about, so I might as well, without going any farther, just introduce our subject. And that is the Arsenal Democracy switch trigger. I always want to call it the bang switch trigger. I don't know why. Just always seems to be the bang switch. I don't know. But it is the switch trigger. Simplified, weapon, integrated, something. Acronyms. It's cool. I like it. I have the fire trigger system, the function, innovation, reliability, and ease of installation triggers. So I mean, I don't have any reason. Gotta love acronyms. So here it is. And if you've been around Glocks any sort of amount of time and you are interested in triggers, you've probably heard about this trigger. And you're probably wondering, well, how in the world did you get a hold of one? I've been on a waiting list for 4, 5, 6 months. And the answer to that really comes down to no, I did not purchase this trigger. No, they did not send this trigger to me. However, a friend of one of my customers did send this to me. And I would like to preface this with the fact that I am not going to be bashing Arsenal Democracy or the switch trigger or anything like that. This really is to be a technical overview of the trigger as it came to me. Because, as I said, the friend of a customer, a 1911 guy, had got into Glocks, and very smart man, does his research, and he found that overwhelmingly when it came down to the recommendations of the best trigger out there, it was the switch. And I personally had done research before I got into all of this in a previous life. However, I'm cheap. I won't lie. So I did a lot of modifications myself. I never spent the money, and it was always on back order anyways. So I never really thought I'd get my hands on one until this one came into my life. This one came into my life because the original purchaser of this had an issue with his trigger that he had waited for and received. I really won't go into what those issues were because it seems that his own frame for part of those issues came down to just his frame. Because the switch trigger is a very modified trigger. It brings everything to the wall. Now, having built triggers for multiple different guns, multiple different frames, and having dealt with different issues and the sloppiness between each of these frames, and even polymer 80s and the different generations, I can definitely understand that it's very hard to get things right there each and every time. So having an issue with a trigger right out of the box is not exactly out of the ordinary, especially when you're trying to build something that is right there, that is pretty much on the limits of what a Glock can do. So this gentleman had an issue with their trigger, a couple different issues, and they got a hold of me. And we talked over a couple different things to try to troubleshoot it and see what could be done. Well, He ended up sending it back to Arsenal Democracy, and they replaced it. Within about 2 weeks or so, he had a replacement, put it down in his gun, and he was still having some issue. Probably his biggest issue that he was having at the time was the trigger safety tab in the dingus. The little dingus that rides against the frame was rubbing his frame. And some of the action just wasn't there. It was right up against the wall as the switch trigger is supposed to be. However, the action itself was leaving a lot to be desired. So instead of sending it back to Arsenal Democracy, I said, send it to me, let me take a look at it, I will see if I can fix it and get you up and running, or worst comes to worst, I will trade you for one of my triggers. Just to get him set up right, because he was more than a little bit frustrated having waited and wanting something closer to what his 1911s were. So I definitely understood it, and I said, send it to me. Let me take a look at it. So that is how I got a hold of this Arsenal Democracy switch trigger. And let's go over the technical side of things, why it acts the way it does, why it acts the way it's supposed to, versus kind of what we've got here. Now, I put this gun down into my Nomad Defense, Nomad 9 frame. That is the only, his is a Generation 4. His switch trigger is a Generation 4. Most of you guys know I am a Generation 3 guy, but I happen to have this Nomad 9 Defense frame, Nomad 9 frame from Nomad Defense. Love these frames, by the way. So that's what I put it in, and I did not have the issue of the safety dingus rubbing against the frame. Now, that is something that his initial trigger had, and in the repair trigger had the same thing. He did say that they did replace the trigger shoe, but that issue of the rubbing was not fixed. So here it is in my possession. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the technical aspects, and then we'll talk about a few other things as we go along. Now, let's start with the trigger shoe itself. It is their signature shoe, a little bit bulky, never really been my thing aesthetics wise. You'll see the bronze bushing there, as they call it, a bearing, which is technically still correct. That is from what I can tell, an aluminum nickel bronze bearing, which does have some lubricity properties, kind of overkill, but it works. And looking back at the $185 price tag for this thing, the over-engineering of this trigger shoe, I can definitely, look at it and say, they're not trying to really give you the poke at that price for $185, because the over-engineering of this trigger shoe, the addition of the bushing and the screw to hold in the trigger bar, that costs money and an extra production time. So I have to give them that. So if you are complaining about the $185 price tag, if you ask me, a lot of it goes into the trigger shoe itself. Now, in order to get that crisp, right up at the wall feeling, if you have ever read any of my trigger or my trigger breakdown, trigger shoe breakdown, or my trigger shoe breakdown videos, you will know that a lot of the action of a trigger when it comes to pre-travel is dictated by the trigger shoe design. Now this one does have what a lot of them have, limiting the trigger travel by, oh, come on now. Let's, got to get used to this camera. Ah, there we go. The slot in the back of the trigger shoe itself. There we go. It just has a very small slot that has been located in a place where pre-travel is extremely reduced. And they're they are the most extreme trigger shoe out there. That's how they get it right up to the wall. So that's probably part of the that's not probably the secret. That is their secret. Now, one of the really cool things that they did that you're not going to find from a lot of the others when it comes to being cranked right up to the wall is, in order to do that, they came up with a very small, let's see if I can get this, trigger safety tab that rides up against the frame. It is minuscule. Let's see if I can get this on camera. Oh, it's just very small. A lot of your triggers, take for example, there we go, Steel City Arsenal. You can see that guy right there. At least I hope you can. It is relatively large. There's a lot of meat there that's exposed. Well, there's not so much of that on the Arsenal Democracy. So it's right there up against the wall, and it still has that safety engaged for the trigger safety. Now, if you know anything about the Glock model of operation, you should know that when you are right up against that wall, you do come into another safety issue. Now, the way that the Glock operates, see if I can get this in here. Alright, here's the housing and the cruciform. Oh, come on now. Over there. Rides up on this ledge. Let's take it out of there so we can see it. See how there's a drop off? See my eye? Oh, there's my eye. You can see that there's a drop off. And normally a Glock cruciform rides up in this ledge. Oh, I'm not doing well about showing this. Rides up in this ledge. Now, when you take the pre-travel out, and as you pull that trigger back, it drops. That ledge allows the cruciform to drop. And the more pre-travel that you take out of a trigger, the closer and closer your cruciform gets to that drop ledge. And in Arsenal Democracy's case, it is literally past or right at the very tip of the drop ledge, which can create and is a unsafe condition. Now, Arsenal Democracy did not leave that alone. They went in, and you will see, if I can get this thing, you see that little shiny dot there? Oh, there it is. See that shiny dot? That is a set screw. That is a set screw that they have drilled through the top of the plastic. You should be able to see there's a hole in my sole. Yeah, there's a hole through the top where they drilled in and put a set screw and then machined it down so that it was nice and smooth, basically extending the drop ledge so that the drop safety is still there. I've seen it done with other custom trigger builders. I personally do it to some of my competition packs where I do crank it right back to the wall. So I have to give them that. That is a good idea, and it does work. That is how they're able to maintain that part of the drop safety being that close to the ledge, or having that much pre-travel taken out of it. Now, another part of it, in order to help maintain drop safety, they do some radical profiling of the little bird's head, if you will. See if we can zoom in. Yep, kind of radical profile there. A little bit different than what I personally run, but that works. That does work. The other thing they do is they do some. They take the rear of the cruciform, what you might consider the sear. They take that down to a very nice polish. Take any marks off of it, and the entire trigger bar just has a really nice finish to it. So it's not a tumble polish. It looks like it's a good hand polish job, similar to what I would do. And in some instances they go a little overboard, but there is some definite time in this trigger bar. I have to give them that. I will definitely give them that. There's very little marks on this thing, so they've definitely spent a lot of time on finishing this trigger bar out. So, very high marks there. You are not going to find this level of polish on your drop-in kits from Apex or Agency, or definitely not Overwatch. So there's definitely a lot of time and thought put into this trigger. Unfortunately, and this is really where I'm going to go back to the issues and why this trigger came to me, because we're basically done with the technical side of it. Because while there is one last little bit of information, and that is the trigger connector, I do not have in this trigger their original connector. I have the connector that was sent back to the customer when they repaired the trigger because of an issue that he was having. Now, the issue that he was having was, aside from the trigger rubbing the frame in two different places, a binary fire, basically. Or during reset, it was dropping the sear. So you could cock the pistol, you could pull the trigger the first time, it would fire, and then when you went to reset, it would drop the sear. So that was the main issue. And I saw pictures of the connector that was in the pistol, or in the trigger pack originally, and it's a very good connector. I definitely approve. It's something I've seen pictures of, and I've known for a while what connector they normally used, so I was good with that. And the issue that he was having, pretty easily to correct. However, with the trigger shoe issues that he was having, it was better for him to send it to them. Well, when he got it back, they had fixed one rubbing issue, left one rubbing issue, and they sent him a different connector. Uh-oh. It's the basic $15 Ghost 3.5 pound. It's a safer connector. I get that. Less chance of dropping the sear because it is more of a basic, very basic connector. So their fix on that side of the house was to replace the connector with something safer. And this made the action of the trigger very, very long. the weight was still, you know, relatively low at 3 pounds, 3.5 pounds, but the reset was just not there. And it won't be with a connector like this. So I think that's really where we get off on where I personally feel like was not the right thing to do. What they should have instructed their customer to do was to readjust the sear or the cruciform to a higher angle, because they do go in here and do some heavy polishing and removal of tool marks on the lug or the sear where it contacts the cruciform or the striker lug. And they do remove some material. Now when you do that, some frames you're going to be just fine. Some need a little bit of tweaking on that sear in order to get the proper engagement and proper action when it goes to reset. However, instead of instructing a customer how to fix this, they changed the connector to a basic Ghost 3.5 pound connector, which is a subpar connector. It is safer in the manner of it's a less aggressive connector. It has a slower reset, less chance of it dropping the sear. But the problem is, when you pay $185 for a trigger to have an amazing action, and instead of a high quality connector, you are sent back a very basic, very cheap, bottom of the line connector, at least in my book. And let's try to get that to zoom in. There it is. It's just a no-go. There was a better fix for the issue. Now, the issue of the trigger rubbing against his frame, that was one thing that I really hoped that I could fix for him, but there's just not enough material there for me to do so. The connector, I could replace it with a better connector, but I can replace it with a better connector, adjust his sear angle, and show him how to do it, which I have done so. But I can't fix the safety issue, the safety tab issue. So what I'm doing is I am replacing his Arsenal Democracy switch with one of my own triggers in order to take care of him, because like I said, he came from 1911s. He really was fighting the whole Glock thing, and I want to make sure that he has a pleasant experience, and thus far he is not. So I guess I've gone on a bit of a tangent, but as for the Arsenal Democracy switch, as it normally comes, and if it's set up in your gun, it's a good trigger. It will have a pretty amazing action. Is it the best? I can definitely say it is not the best, but it's pretty damn good if you can get a hold of one in its proper configuration and it works in your frame. In my opinion, the Elite Marksman V2 is actually a superior trigger for one major reason. That is, the Elite Marksman has an over travel stop adjustment, which you'll see there's a hole in the back of this housing. Oh, come on now. Wow, I am doing a piss poor job. Alright, there's a set screw right there for over travel adjustment, which the Arsenal Democracy does not have, which helps with setting up for the very best that you can get. Now, will the Elite Marksman have more travel? Pre-travel. Yes, but it keeps it on that drop safety ledge. But when it comes to reset, it is going to actually beat the switch trigger. And I can tell you that the pre-travel that the Elite Marksman does have is basically negligible. It's just enough to really keep you safe and on that drop safe ledge. So, not only that, mine is available and it's $10 cheaper, and I often run sales. So, really, you know, aside from that little plug of my own Elite Marksman, that's the Arsenal Democracy. I know I've been on here for quite a while. You know, if I didn't cover something that you might want to ask, leave it in the comments below. This has probably been one of my longest videos that I've done in a while, and I probably didn't cover each and every aspect, but I really did try. And we can revisit this again in the future. So, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Instagram, tell me dirty things, tell me things you don't want to know, or that I don't want to know, and you know, maybe your experiences if you've run the Arsenal Democracy switch. As I said, it's not a bad trigger. It's not for me. I definitely could admire some of the things that they've done, and you know, if you can get a hold of one, if you want to wait for one, that's cool. Mine are available though. You do have a little bit of a wait as I build it, but that wait time is definitely going down in 2019. Definitely a lot quicker, And one little parting shot before we go. This is my Glock 34 with one of my more competition style triggers, and while it is missing the safety dingus, it's kind of amazing to watch. So, let's see if we can get it in the light here, because definitely just doing a shitty job of... Oh, well. Light. Not gonna happen. Let's try to aim up towards the light. We'll get it right on 30 minutes. Oh, wow. This is terrible. So, that's just something to be looking forward to. That's not the Elite Marksman. That's kind of something special. I've definitely held you guys here for far too long. You probably could have shut it down at about the 23, 24 minute mark. So, this has been another trigger video, and we will catch you next time, hopefully in a lot briefer time. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Follow me on Instagram. We will catch you later.